Hey, good morning, Carl. Welcome to Saturday morning multifamily unplugged. This is our first show, buddy.
Oh
How
yeah,
about that?
I'm excited about it. Did you have your breakfast this morning?
I sure did. What'd you have?
I'm a creature of habit. I have my 4 eggs and my 6 strips of bacon. That's it.
4 eggs. You eat those yolks, huh?
Yeah, I do. It's funny you asked that. I do 2 yolks and 2 full eggs, right? And I take the whites off the two. But
Yeah.
I don't know. That's what people tell me. That's what people tell me what's healthy. How about you? Were you up at 5 a.m. like normal?
Yeah. No, actually, well, you know what? Actually, I slept in this morning, right? So I was up about 5:15. I got up and did a couple things and worked out. Had a good workout this morning, and actually, still my body feels like it's still running. But all I had was a bowl of cereal this morning. So
Well,
that's
good for you, Mike. I got to take my hat off to you for a guy that's your age. You know, you, I know you're up every morning and you get at it. So you're the early bird, that's for sure.
yeah.
What are we talking about today?
Well, great question, right? So I want to first I want to thank everybody who's signing in. We got a bunch of people jumping on this morning, which is awesome. Our first show, our inaugural kickoff, right? And I want to thank all those folks for being here today and supporting this. And make sure that please tell everybody about this. We're going to be here every Saturday morning, and we're going to give you guys some raw, unplugged, unscripted multifamily stuff, things that have happened in the week, things that are going on. And what we want to say is if you folks have questions along the way, drop them in the chat. We got a chat box up. And if you have something come up during the week that you want to talk about on Saturday morning, shoot either me or Moose an email and let us know. We'll make sure that we put that on a chat list for Saturday morning, and we'll just kind of talk about that. And we'll mention that a couple times through. But first, what I want to do is, Carl, I want you to just, 30-second elevator pitch on who you are, what you do, and why this came about for you.
Well, yeah. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Carl Gordon Moose. I go by C. Gordon Moose. But as you know, Mike, I was in the multifamily business for years. I was a banker, did that for about 8 years, and then I got into buying multifamily. As a matter of fact, the only thing I bought besides my own condo was a multifamily buildings. I think we started off. The first one was 18 units. The smallest one was 10 units. I think the biggest ones we bought were about 30 units. So it wasn't quite at the level that you were, because I know you were buying, 150, 160 unit buildings. We never quite got to that. We never broke that, that 20, that 30 to 50 barrier, which, we could talk about that. But yeah, and then I had partners, every deal we did. I was the managing partner, the guy that did everything. The other people were the money people, which is, I never put a penny of my own money in. And then along the way, I developed what I'm doing now, the Find Your Focus and your focus guys. So, and I appreciate I know you and I talk on a regular basis, and it was your idea to have this Saturday morning multifamily unplugged. So I appreciate you invite me to join.
Well, Carl, I invited you because of the mindset piece, right? And you bring a really valuable component to every investor or property manager's lifestyle. And that component is what we think about and how we behave mentally, right? So, and we'll get into that. Hey, one thing I want to tell everybody is thanks for registering, and just know this, that if you register once, you'll have access every time moving forward. So you don't have to register again, just so you know that. So just that first time registration. Anyhow, I'm Mike Morawski. I've been in the real estate space for about 3 decades, and I'm dating myself a little bit. First got into real estate. I was a sales agent. I sold our single family properties, did a lot of fix and flips on my own, but I sold single family properties right here in Chicago, northwest suburbs, and did very well. Built a team. We sold about 125 homes a year. Did a couple $100 million in transactions. And then I went into the apartment business. I always wanted to be in the apartment business. Long time ago, when I was in the construction business, I did a lot of work for a company called Inland. Inland today is the largest REIT in the world, right? And for you folks that don't know what a REIT is, it's like a mutual fund. It's a real estate investment trust. You can find them out there for passive real estate investing, privately, publicly traded. So they're great opportunities when you're involved with a great sponsor. So But I watched their model. You know, here's 4 high school teachers that got started, and they got started with 1 4-unit frame building right in Norridge here in Chicago, and look where they're at today.
Yeah, it's
So
a great, that's a great story, isn't it?
yeah,
And it just illustrates, for those that don't know, yeah, 4 high school teachers that got together and started with 1 building, and now they're one of the biggest companies in the country.
yeah, just awesome. So I watched them and I said, hey, you know, I can do this, right? So I put together a small company. We went out, raised several $1,000,000, bought 4,000 apartments in 5 different states, and unwound that deal and went in the property management space. I built 2 property management companies and sold them. And today I take all my knowledge and all my experience. And you know what? One thing I say, Carl, to people is you can have all the knowledge and all the experience in the world, but I think here's what people look for today is they look for wisdom. They want to see, first of all, how resilient you are after you make a mistake. And number 2, they want to see your wisdom and what can they learn from that. And that's the thing that I really hope to convey to people is that, hey, you know what? Yeah, I've done a lot and I got some great stories, but the wisdom behind it of what not to do or what to do and how to execute is really what comes forward.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Mike. I just, did you see the thing with Ron LeGrand recently that's been on?
I saw something on Facebook, but I didn't pay attention to it, you
Yeah.
know?
Well, he's Ron LeGrand. I mean, he's been around forever. I mean, he
Right.
was Carlton Sheets, Ron LeGrand. And by the way, I mean,
They're both out there right now too.
yeah, well, Ron's got a little bit. He looks like he's pregnant, but he's got a little bit of a pot belly. You know what I mean? But he's been around for like 40 years. And I mean, it's interesting you say wisdom, right? Because he's got a lot of knowledge. But and this is the same thing I tell you all the time. You've forgotten more knowledge than most people even have learned yet, right? And Ron's the same way. And it's really he's a wise guy. I mean, he's not a wise guy, but he's a wise guy. He's got a lot of wisdom, because and how do you acquire that? Well, by getting your butt kicked a few times, right? I mean, by making a lot of mistakes and learning and moving forward and falling down. And it was funny that I saw him. I'm like, oh my God, he's still out there. I mean, he's got to be 75 years old.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And hey, you know what they say about coaching and training, that there's always people who want to learn. And if we can help them, we help them, right? So,
Yeah.
hey, listen, I got a couple topics I want to talk about this morning.
Yeah.
The first one, and I'm going to run this up the flagpole, but this was on LinkedIn yesterday morning, right? And so I'm not taking credit for any of this. I want to give credit to the author, and the author's name is Richard J. Chang. He's an editor at LinkedIn News.
Yeah.
But what he's talking about integrity, and he says the idea of the day is to maintain integrity. I wrote a little note here: investing, acquisitions with sellers and dispositions and buyers, property management and tenants all need to know how to treat each other and all need to know how to live in integrity, right? He says that if you stay flexible, you can accomplish your goals that you set prior to the world's unexpected changes, and he's advertently just commenting on the COVID stuff going on, right?
Yeah.
In times like this, we all need orientation. The more the ambiguity and uncertainty there is, the more we have to live within our own integrity, right?
Yeah.
And I really thought that this guy's article, and he just kind of goes on to just talk about how we treat people and how we act around people, and people respect you a lot more. And I'm huge on integrity.
Yeah.
I want to bring a platform to the table where there's total transparency, where I teach people to be transparent, and where within those integrity boundaries, right? Where, hey, listen, I'm an open book, man. So, and I just think that people, that builds that confidence. And I think not just for you or I, but for anybody, in your real estate investing, when you go to buy a piece of property from a seller, an off-market deal, you're trying to schmooze a seller, you know what? If you're living with integrity, that seller's going to see that. If you're out of integrity, that seller's going to see that.
Yeah.
So it makes it a lot easier for you to try and create a win-win situation. But I just think that there's a lot to be said about that topic.
Well, I totally agree with you. And I remember when I used to own, most of the properties I owned were they were kind of C properties, if you know what I mean. And for those of you that don't know, properties, multifamily, and all real estate is they're classes, right? A, B, C class. So these were A class obviously is the best properties, the primo properties, right? Midtown Manhattan or River North Chicago, the Marina in San Francisco, the really primo. So mine were basically C plus B minus. So what I used to tell people, Mike, and it goes exactly what you were talking about. I'd say, listen, people, my tenants, right? I'd set the tone. I'd say, listen, this is your home. It's my building, but it's your home, right? It's my building, but it's your home. And then I would tell them, someone owned this building before I did when you lived here. I own it, and most likely you'll still be living here, when I'm gone, in 3, 4, 5 years or whatever, which was our strategy. We were on a 5-year program. And people really got that. And I said, let's be partners. I said, I'm not here to, I'm here to help you. I'm here to provide safe and secure housing for you. And you're going to help me too, because I may only be here 1 day a week or 2 days a week, but you're here 7 days a week. So I said, let's have integrity in our partnership. Let's trust each other, right? Let's as you mentioned, be transparent. And that really went a long way, for the tenants that they had a high level of integrity and they had a high level of character. That resonated with them. For some people, it just went in 1 year and out the other. However, once I established that, then I had to maintain my own integrity, right? And, for me, integrity really means doing what you say and saying what you do, right? So if I tell somebody I'm going to be there at a certain time to walk through their property or to fix the plumbing or whatever it may be, it's a test of my integrity. If I show up on time and I'm present, then my integrity meter goes up, right? If I'm late and I blow them off or I don't follow up, whatever, my integrity level goes down. So what happens there? So they match my integrity level, right? If I'm not showing integrity to my tenants aren't going to have integrity with me.
Right. What else is interesting about it, and I don't want to belabor the topic too much, but I think one of the reasons you and I get along as well as we do, and the people in our lives, our circle of influence, the people we hang around with, is because we all live in that integral space, right? We know that it really matters to the other guy what we do when you're not paying attention or you're not looking. I always tell the story, right? I teach. I've taught a number of ethics classes, right? And one of the stories I always teach is, hey, listen, what if your accountant called you on April 13th and you had gotten him all your tax information for the end of the year and he has to file for your taxes, right? And he says, listen, you only spent $700 last year on travel expenses. And the IRS has a clause in it that says, or they have a rule that says, you're allowed to take up to $2,500 with no receipts. So, hey, you want me to take the full 2,500 for you, or should I just take the 700? So what would you tell your accountant? And for me in my life, I have to tell my accountant, hey, listen, you're fired. I'm going to find somebody new, because why would you even bring that comment to me, Right. But that's just who I am today and the space that I live in. So,
well, that's integrity. I mean, that's, and again, it leads right into, what I consider character, right? Character is doing the right thing when no one's looking, right? When no one's looking, doing the right thing. And, it's interesting, Mike, because you've told that story before, and I've actually sat in on some of your classes. They're really great. And I remember you asking an audience of about 50 people, if I remember correctly. And the looks on people's faces were because they were really wondering, like, yeah, what would I do? Would I take that extra $1,800? And at the end of the day, your integrity and your character, nobody knows it better than yourself, right? We have to live with ourselves. We have to look at ourselves in the mirror. We have to go to sleep with ourselves at night. And it really boils down to, are you okay with, not having integrity? Are you okay with only doing the right thing and having character when people are looking? Or, what's your measure? And absolutely, man, people, you don't have a little meter on your shoulder. Oh, I have character today and no integrity today, right? But people sense that, right? When you're a man of character, or I should say a person of character, a person of discipline, a person of integrity, people sense it, right? And they want to do business with you. And that's really important. I think that's really important, especially if you're renting. hey, listen, if you're in the multifamily business, you're going to have to deal with people. You're going to deal with tenants. You're going to deal with vendors. You're going to deal with people that come over to do work. And if they don't pick up that you have integrity and character, their level of integrity and character is going to go down when they're dealing with you. And you and I both know that.
Yep. Hey, and so here's what I want to say to the folks listening this morning. If you want to send a private message, you can do that in the chat too. You know, just click on my name or Carl's name, and you could send one of us a private message. And I would just say, if you have a comment about integrity, a thumbs up, thumbs down, you know, use a reaction, whatever, but throw something in the chat. Let us know what you're thinking. Hey, listen, I'm going to go on because we're going to burn through this, 40 minutes so quick this morning, because it sounds like we are kind of fired up. But I got a topic, and this is right out of multifamily housing news. Ben Carson this week. So one of the things we're going to do on this call every week, Carl, right, is we're going to talk about something hot in the news. And so you let me pick this week, and I went to multifamily housing news, and what I found was Ben Carson, who leads HUD's Housing and Urban Development, announced a new round of CARES Act funding, but for low income housing, right? So during the coronavirus, there was $472 million in emergency funding that was used for public housing. So when we talk about public housing, we're going to talk about Section 8. We're going to talk about choice voucher programs, right? Those voucher programs, and what Carson is doing. And I believe Carson is a man of integrity. I believe he's a God-fearing man, and I believe that he's a good guy that is in that cabinet, right? But here's what I gotta tell you, I don't know that I like this, and here's why: because we're giving more again, right? But it's only for low-income housing. What about market rate housing, where you've got tenants who are your working class people? They're not low income. Your working class people living in market rate housing, whether they're a middle manager or whether they're running a manufacturing line in a manufacturing facility, and they're laid off.
Yeah.
And they're not working. Okay. Because listen, the number in Chicago was scary, right? 4,400 businesses closed down in March. 2,100 of them will never reopen again.
Yeah.
Those are big numbers. So I don't know that we have seen the full effect of that yet. And I don't know what it looks like January 1 right now. And I don't think anybody's got a crystal ball. I'm all for the government helping out here, and I'm all for the government supporting. But what about the other product classes, and what's happening with those?
Yeah, that's interesting. It really is interesting, because I remember you and I had a conversation with, I think her name is Mary, a woman in your network, where she was concerned because she owns some multifamily, and some of her people have been laid off and they're having trouble making their rent, right? And from being a property owner or property manager, that's a real concern, because what nobody talks about, Mike, is your mortgage is still due.
Yeah.
Right? If you stop paying your insurance and you have a fire, guess what? The insurance company is not going to give you a break. You still have to pay the water bill, which is usually the tenant. The tenants usually pay the electric and the gas, but the landlord, unless they have something metered or some other program, usually pay the water. Well, you got to pay the water bill. You know what I mean? And so, that from a property owner and property manager standpoint, we're kind of just out there, like it's tough luck. And then they're also talking about, and listen, I totally understand, that there are people 100% that need assistance and need help. And this whole thing hit us out of the blue. Nobody could have predicted this. It's not really any one person's fault. And it's affected people. And I'm totally for helping people out, and however, the landlord and the property owners nobody's really talking about that. Like, because we're business people too. You know what I mean? And most property owners, unless you're an Inland or unless you're a Blackstone, we don't have big reserves of cash. We might only be sitting on 5 or 7 or 10% reserves in a conservative spot to ride us through or pay for a boiler that might go down or a roof or whatever. But, to carry 6 months of rent is. Have you ever seen in your 30 years? Have you ever seen something like this? Because I know you had a big portfolio. Would you have
Right.
4 or 5,000 units at one point?
Yeah, about 4,000 units. We managed about 10,000.
Were any of them down in like Florida or in Houston with the hurricanes where you had a situation like this?
No, we were more inland, had a big footprint in the Dallas Fort Worth market and then in the Ohio Valley market.
Right.
I owned one multifamily unit here in Illinois. So, but what's interesting is,
When you say unit, you mean building, right? You really mean
right,
building.
building,
How many
right.
units was that in that?
That was a small one. That was the first one we ever did. That was 11 units.
Yeah. Okay.
And learned quickly that Chicago wasn't going to be a market at 100 grand a door that we were going to make any money in. So,
Right.
And that's a whole long story. That's a training story. But, here's what's in one of my thoughts on this whole thing is, if you're in multifamily, you're safer than if you're in single family.
Yeah.
Okay. I always talk about this. I talk about the economies of scale and the difference between single family versus multifamily, right? Hey, look, if I own one single family house, Moose, and you don't live there, I'm paying my mortgage payment out of my pocket. It's painful. But if I own a 3-unit and I got, I have a 10%, 20% vacancy, I still have cash flow coming in. It's not as painful, right?
Right.
So the economies of scale makes a big difference. This is one of the things I do in my coaching and my training. And listen, I want anybody who's got a comment right now to throw something in the chat and help us out here. If we're not seeing things the way you do, or you want us to look at something differently, throw something in the chat. Let us know what you're thinking about right now. But I believe this is why I teach people to, when they come in the investing space, the real estate investing space, go right into multifamily. You can create wealth in 2 to 4 unit buildings, small single family properties, right? If you are currently in single family, if you're currently in single family and you want to make a transition into multifamily, it's a smart thing to do right now. I always equate it like this. If you're playing Monopoly, right, you want to put 4 on Boardwalk, 4 on Park Place, cash them in, put up a hotel, 4 hotels, go buy a bigger building, right? It's that type of game. And that's how you want to play this real estate multifamily game, because it is about the economies of scale.
Well, don't forget the Baltic Avenue and Vermont and St. James Place, right?
Your Class D stuff, right?
Yeah. It's so funny. I play Monopoly with my kids. It's hysterical. My son always buys that first strip, between Go and Jail. He always does really well because he's the first one to have houses. He's the first one to have hotels, and you can't get by there without paying them at least once. So it's kind of funny, but. No, I couldn't agree with you more, Mike. I fell in. The first building I bought was an 18-unit building, and it was a mistake. And the reason being, you're going to make mistakes, right? When you're new at this. And by the way, I couldn't agree with him more. I mean, there's a natural transition from, the person that buys a condo, and then 3 years later they maybe buy a single family, and then they buy another one, and then they want to do something else. Making that transition to the 2 to 4 flat is a natural. It's a natural transition. And, I couldn't agree with you more, because the fact is you are going to make mistakes, right? You're going to make mistakes. So think of it this way. I bought an 18-unit building. If I made one mistake per door, per year, which I actually made more, but that's 18 mistakes in a year, right? That's like 1.5 mistakes a month, right? If I had a 3-unit building, it would be like 1 mistake every 4 months, right? I would only make 3 mistakes just with that simple math, right? And actually, that's kind of the way it worked out. So my point is, I totally agree with you, and that's why I'm glad we teamed up on the multifamily global summit, because it's really all about building wealth with 2 to 4 to 6 flats, and then going from there, right? And so for sure, anybody that wants to get involved and wants to get started, that is the easiest entry point for multifamily. And the other thing I just want to say is nobody cares what degree you have, or they don't care about your background, or what your family did, or what fraternity or sorority you're in, right? Mike, of all the hundreds of deals you closed, has anybody ever asked you what kind of car you drove, or what neighborhood you lived in, or what college you went to?
No, but I got a funny story about that, though.
Because nobody cared, right?
No, nobody cares, though. Right. So listen, we got a question in the chat.
And then I want to hear your story.
Yeah. So here's the story real quick, right? So I'm a new sales agent and I'm working for Remax and I'm selling real estate. And I drove a Ford back then and I drove an Expedition. So I go to this guy's house in on a listing appointment. And the first thing he does is he comes out on the front porch and he says, "I was just making sure you weren't driving a Mercedes." He goes, it's funny you bring that up.
Yeah.
I remember all these stories. They're crazy, right?
Yeah.
But okay, so here we got a couple questions. Here's the first one. What would be the difference if someone owns 10 single family houses versus one building with 10 units in it? In terms of the owner operating expenses and financing costs? I love this question because this is my sweet spot. This is what I talk about, right? I give this model. I do a webinar called Creating Wealth with in Small Multifamilies. And in that webinar, I teach the difference if you owned 100 single family units or 100 single family properties. Here's what you have. You've got 10 single family houses, 10 locations, 10 roofs that could go bad, 10 furnaces that could go bad, 10 hot water heaters that could go bad, 10 driveways, 10 sets of stairs, 10 bad tenants. Hey, if nobody lives in one of those, it becomes painful if you have to pay that mortgage every month. Okay. If you've got a 30% vacancy, if you own 10 units in one building, you've got one roof, one furnace, one set of washers and dryers, the list goes on, right? So your economies of scale is greater. Now, the second piece to this that she's asking about is the expenses, right? And those expenses, what I find in a multifamily, when we do our due diligence and we're evaluating property deals, we look at an expense ratio of 50%. So my income comes in, my expenses are about 50%. In the single family arena, because of vacancies, because of higher expenses, your expenses tend to range closer to 70%. In small multifamilies, your expenses range about 30%. So it's a big swing on all three platforms. But every time I do the numbers, every time I do the due diligence, it comes up, that Excel spreadsheets never lie.
Yeah.
So.
And one thing I want to add, Mike, because you couldn't have said it better, really, and that's exactly what my philosophy was when I started buying property. The only thing I owned was my condo that I lived in. And I said, I'm going to get into property, right? I said, why do I want 10 addresses? Why do I want 10 driveways? So I agree with you. And then there's one other thing that I just want to add. And this goes to anybody that's listening. If you own property and it's not in an LLC, a corporation, or a trust, even better, a trust, you need to, when you get off the phone today, you need to call your attorney and you need to transfer title immediately into a trust, an LLC, or corporation. I would suggest a trust. Now, Mike and I are not attorneys. We're not accountants. We're just telling you what our experience is. And the reason being is a trust will give you anonymity and it will give you some tax benefits and it will give you protection, right? You personally. So if any of you own any real estate, your house, a condo, an investment, anything, a vacation home, personally, get it out of your person immediately because that's number one. So with regard to your question, you could put, rather than having 10 trusts or 10 assets in a single trust, with a multifamily, you have one PIN, one address, one asset, as opposed to managing 10 assets, right? So just from an accounting standpoint and from all the legalese standpoint, it also becomes much simpler.
Yep. All right. So we have another question. This one, do you recommend new investors purchase property out of state for their second or third deal? How can a new investor ensure their property is taken care of if they can't physically visit the building on a regular basis? Great question.
Can I jump in real quick, Mike?
Yeah, go ahead.
So from my perspective, geography was always a key thing, right? Being close within an hour and a half. Now that's just my own personal. And then the other thing I would just say real quickly is it depends on the size of the unit. So go ahead. go ahead, take it from there, Mike.
Yeah. So, quick story, right? My first building, my first multifamily I ever bought was a 2-unit. But years later, when I went into the apartment business, the first one that we bought was an 11-unit in the Chicago market. Figured out very quickly that you don't ever just listen to the seller, that you do your own due diligence, you do your own investigation. That was first mistake I made. Second one was, um, being in the Chicago market, knew we couldn't make money. So we decided to leave the Chicago market, went to central Indiana, bought a 64 unit as our second purchase. So listen to those numbers. First one was 11, next one was 64 units. The economies of scale gave me the opportunity to have an on-site handyman who lived in one of the units, who took care of everything, helped manage, help rent, help write leases and things like that. So you're asking a couple questions here. How do you, first of all, do due diligence? Due diligence comes with experience, comes with knowledge. If you don't know how to do it yourself, get someone to help you, walk you through it. I'd sign up for that for you for a minute, to help you walk through and look at everything and make sure that you are making a smart choice.
Yeah.
The next piece is, how do you get somebody to take care of it? That's a great point. I own some 4 units in another market where those were a little bit tougher because they were smaller and a little bit more scattered. But if you own a little bit bigger building and you have, like I did with the 64 unit, and I had a couple of these where I had a handyman move in and, take care of the property. So there's ways to deal with it. What you have to ask yourself is, what's your risk tolerance? What are you willing to do? For me, I hated the snow. I wanted to be somewhere where I can golf 10 months a year. So that was why I bought a lot of property in the South. So,
Well, but Mike, you bring up a good point. It really depends on your objective. And I know when you work with people and when I work with people, we always start with the why. Like, what is it you want and why do you want it, right? Because some people do that. Some people will buy in Arizona or Florida because they want a business, they want a reason to go there, which, by the way, if you do it correctly, and again, we're not accountants, but, if you're visiting your property, I think you can take advantage of some IRS loopholes, because you're actually doing business. So people, really depends on what your objective is, what you want to do. And, you just alluded to that. You bought in certain areas because you wanted to go visit there. So that's really good stuff. And then I noticed,
yeah.
Victoria, you had a great question. How do you get started? And you know what, Mike? I know we don't have a ton of time left. This might be a good topic that we talk about next week. Getting started. How do you get started? Because that is we can give you the kind of the 30,000 foot view, and then but we really don't have enough time today to talk in in depth. But here's what I would suggest. Anybody that's looking at getting started in multifamily, first of all, I would take a look at what Mike and I are saying. Mike and I have closed thousands of deals collectively, right? We've owned thousands of units together. And we are in agreement that, if you're going to get started, take that first baby step, right? Find a property that's a 2 or 3 flat, maybe a 4 flat. Take your time. Don't get emotional. Don't be in a hurry, right? And if you're thinking about getting started, get your ducks in a row, right? And part of that is, whether it's working with someone like Mike and I, or working with somebody else that you trust and that that has experience, because you can save thousands and thousands of dollars. Trust me, tens of thousands of dollars, depending on the size of the property and the cost, just by doing something right or doing something wrong. So if you're interested in getting started, take your time, really identify what it is that you want to get out of buying property. Don't get emotional, and connect with somebody or a community of people, that can give you some advice and give you some guidance. Because I'm telling you right now, Mike, and you and I can talk about, it's like, I'm going to admit something here. I used to play hockey. I was a little bit of a fighter, right? I don't remember the fights I won. It was the 2 or 3 fights that I lost, right? So it's, we don't remember all the victories, right? We remember the time we really got our butts handed to us, right? In real estate. And so that's my point. You can, you want to connect with somebody that can say, you might not want to do that, or you might want to consider this. because you're opening yourself up to risk. Would you agree, Mike?
Yeah, I agree. And the only comment I want to make on that question about, how do we get started is in what? Are you clear on your why? Are you clear on your what, right? Because the how will always happen as a direct result of how clear we are on why. So that's, and we're hitting the 40-minute mark here pretty quick. So that's it. We'll take on questions this week. Here's what I want to say. If anybody needs to have a personal conversation, mine or Carl's email, phone numbers are in the chat. Reach out to us. We can set up a time. I do free coaching consults with people. So, we can get on the phone, have a 60-minute coaching consultation and walk through some of this and see if we can't maybe help you get on your path a little bit. And my goal is if I can help you be successful, then I've done my job. So whether that's it being involved in, and listen, I'm going to tell you what, I have, Carl, and this, you've told me I'm crazy about this, but I have one of the least expensive group coaching programs in the marketplace today for 12 months. And what you get for that is absurd. So, people that aren't in group coaching with me, I don't know how to group coaching will help you because you learn a lot from other people that you're involved with. You learn a lot from your peers. So I just would encourage people to do that. So
yeah, and I could agree with you more, Mike. It's the benefit of, there's pros and cons both, because you and I both do one-on-one coaching, we do group coaching, we do corporate coaching, but there is a benefit to the group environment because you learn and you hear what other people are experiencing, right? And so something you might not have thought about may be a question, and most likely is a question that somebody else, is having. So that's great. And likewise, anybody that's interested in getting them, I have a little exercise about character, discipline, and integrity. Shoot me an email. I put my email in there, info@yourfocusguy.com. I'll send you that free PDF. And then just real quickly, Mike, I don't know if you noticed, because I know we're getting short on time. There was somebody that had a question real quick about cash. Maybe that's what we address next week. Getting started, how much money is required, because that's a little bit longer answer to a short question, but absolutely. Mike, I bought every building I bought. I think there were 22 buildings. I didn't put a nickel of my own money in, right? And so there are absolute strategies that people can come up with, that if they don't have a ton of cash, don't let that be a barrier of entry, because there are ways to get creative, totally legitimate, creative ways to get into buildings without any money of your own.
Yep. Very good. Hey, listen, I wanted to kind of start to end this today on one thing. My book is coming out in the next few weeks, and that book's called Exit Plan. And I was rereading it with my editor over the last couple of weeks. And as I got to the end, I have a quote at the end of the book. And it just really, I think it talks to the heart of the real estate investor. I think it talks to the heart of the people who are in this thing and in the trenches, right? But this is a quote by Teddy Roosevelt, former president of the United States. And it says, "It's not the critic that counts. The credit belongs to the one who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust, sweat, and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes up short again and again." And I just go on to say, I encourage you as a real estate investor, as a real estate professional, to take action. We can get all that knowledge. We can absorb that wisdom. I tell people, be a sponge, take it all in, and we have events coming up and we have things coming up, Carl, that people are going to be able to absorb it, take it in from some of the greatest in the business, right? But bust through your fear and take action and move forward.
And part of that is absolutely, Mike, action, it's all about action. Part of that is, you mentioned it earlier, if you register for the call today, you don't have to go through that process again. And feel free to share this with anybody. If you have a spouse or a brother or sister or somebody that's also considering partnering with you, bring them to the call next week. We're going to do this every Saturday, 10 a.m. Central Standard Time, same link. And we're going to answer, Mike, there are a couple questions in there that we won't get to today, but we'll make a list and we'll answer those questions first thing next week. How about that?
Yep. Sounds good, Carl.
Awesome.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for being here. Remember, we have multifamily global summit that's going to be coming up. We'll have more information to that, but that's going to be 3 days of the greatest speakers, authors, people in the multifamily space, everything from small multifamily to huge syndicators, and the people in between that help make it happen. So make sure that you're there. You won't want to miss that. You know, early bird registration, $7 on Facebook Live.
Yeah,
So
and that's October, right? We're doing that in October.
right.
Yeah. So yeah, maybe we'll have more details about that next Saturday.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, let's do that.
So. All right, cool. Mike, enjoy the rest of your day. I know you're going golfing with your son. That's awesome.
Yeah. And I know you're going to see your kids today and spend some time with them. And so enjoy your day, enjoy your weekend. Thanks for being here, everybody. This has been Multifamily Unplugged, and we look forward to you being here again.
See you, Mike.
Bye, Carl.